The suspicions about Torrijos' death may well have been well founded. In years to come, it would emerge that an enterprising man by the name of Manuel Noriega may have been recruited by the U.S. government to remove Torrijos. And as it happened, Noriega happened to be the general successor to Torrijos. There was one or two interim leaders for a period of maybe a year or so, but Noriega came in afterwards and firmed his leadership. Noriega himself has a very interesting past. He was professional military all the way through, went to a military school in Peru, officers candidate school there. He was then trained in a U.S. military school in the Canal Zone. And he also apparently trained in something called PsyOps, psychological operations, which sounds terrifying, frankly, in North Carolina in the U.S. In his 20s, he was likely recruited in a soft way by the CIA to be a general informer and a source of information. And as the years went on, this relationship became formalized, and he actually started to get direct payments from them. The scale of these payments is a topic of some dispute. The U.S. government say no more than 300,000. He himself says probably closer to about 10 million. He did quite...
That's a bit of a disparity.
He did quite well out of the relationship with the U.S. government either way, up to a certain point.
And Mark, I'm sure he was always loyal to the Americans then as a result of that, and there was never any misunderstandings.
This is such a mess. So he follows Omar Torrijos, and similarly quite populist, but probably a bit stronger on the authoritarian side. A lot more secret police and so on. He doesn't have any of the arguably positive credits that Torrijos had of, a bit of liberalization in the media and so on. In 1983, he replaced Torrijos' successor as the head of the National Guard. In 1984, there was an election held, actually with our old friend Arnulfo Arias.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah, he was back. He came back for to try to be president for a fourth time. And actually, apparently, massively won the popular vote. And Noriega basically just changed the result. He didn't really worry too much about it. He changed the result and installed his own guy. In 1983, he signed a lot of very favorable agreements in favor of the United States, which kind of gave him a bit of credit with them to govern as he saw fit. So he's able to get away with this pretty obvious election fraud. Also, and this may have been around this time, but probably had been going on for quite a long time, he was probably the main mover of drugs in Panama. He was the biggest drug dealer in that area of the world, and had a very strong relationship with the Medellin cartel, and Pablo Escobar is probably the most famous drug dealer as a part of that group. And yeah, so there's all of these different aspects to it. There's the secret police, the frauding of elections. In 1985, there's I'm not going to go into the details of what actually happened because it's so distressingly grim. I would prefer not to. The information's out there if you really want to know what happened. But it was a outspoken critic of Noriega called Hugo Spadafora, who had trained as a medic in Italy and had fought in a lot of South American civil conflicts and was seen as kind of a prominent voice in Central American politics. And he returned to Panama. His head was never found. His body was found trussed up in a U.S. postal bag. From a call that was listened into by authorities, probably American, Noriega was in Paris at the time, and he was speaking with one of his local chiefs, a man by the name of Cordoba. And Cordoba said to him over the phone, "We have the rabid dog," meaning assumedly Mr. Spadafora. And Noriega's response was particularly chilling. And it was, "And what do we do with rabid dogs?" which was essentially seen as Noriega giving the order to kill him. So it's a short period of time between 1983 and 1989 when things came to a head. At this point, the American government seemed to see Noriega as more of a liability than anything. He had this huge drug trafficking enterprise. He was taking money from the U.S. government. And then I think it was in a Florida court, he was indicted for his drug smuggling. And this led to something called Operation Just Cause.
That's always a suspect name for an operation.
I mean, with good reason. I mean, you look at what was the name of the operation of the U.S. government going into Iraq? It was Operation Enduring Freedom or Iraqi Freedom, and it didn't turn out that way. Similarly, Operation Just Cause was probably called so because it was universally condemned by the UN. They saw it as a completely flagrant flouting of international laws. And both invasions were done by a Bush. This was
Herbert Walker. H.W. Bush.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Herbert Walker. Operation Just Cause was an invasion of 27,000 troops and a lot of really new high-tech hardware. It was the first time that the Apache helicopter, which is pretty iconic, was used. Considering it was an invasion, definitely there were casualties, particularly a quite poor civilian neighborhood was burned. I think accidentally. It wasn't that a fire was set. It just caught fire.
I think there were mostly wood cabins, so it didn't.
Exactly. And the entire aim of this invasion was both to protect again the U.S. interest in the canal, but also because Noriega, because he had been a CIA asset, they were very concerned about all of the stuff he probably knew about them. He had actually there are photos of him meeting with George Herbert Walker Bush in previous years, as he was I think he was an important vice president in the past. So they invaded to capture Noriega. Noriega, knowing this, went on the run, and he went to the Apostolic Nunciature of the Holy See, which is longhand for the Vatican Embassy. He turned up there and gave the local Monsignor Laboa, he gave him two options. Either I go and fight a guerrilla war and kill many more people, or you give me asylum. And Laboa only had minutes to make the decision and did what he thought would be the option that would cost the least in human lives. This led to a really bizarre scenario where you had this tiny enclave of the Vatican on Panamanian territory with Noriega inside, surrounded on all sides by the US Army, who are afraid of just running in and grabbing him because of how it would be seen in largely Catholic South America. It would be
you don't want to go to war with Catholicism if you can avoid
Definitely
it.
Not in South America.
Yeah, absolutely not. So on one side, you've got Noriega and 3 to 4 of his high-ranking officials who is living this semi-monk life in a cell, reading the Bible, apparently.
Well, there's limited reading material in a
cell.
Yeah. Ideally, he might have repented a little bit about some of the things he had done in the past. Then you had Monsignor Laboa, who was trying to convince him to leave and also trying to separate him away from the other officials who were there with him, because he felt that those officials were trying to encourage Noriega to seek asylum in another country, trying to sneak out. And then you have the U.S. Army surrounding on all sides.
So and how did they get him out?
Through the power of rock and roll, or at least that's how they attempted it. They surrounded him, and again, this word PSYOPs, Psychological Operations Unit, moved in and started blaring in heavy metal music, trying to, rock him out of the Vatican Embassy. The Secretary of State James Baker wrote to the Pope personally, and wrote, "This is an exception to diplomatic immunity. We've indicted him as a drug dealer." Now, the
I don't think that's how diplomatic immunity works, but...
Yeah, no, absolutely not. It's completely nonsense. The playlist that the American Army played included "Danger Zone" by Kenny Loggins, "Don't Fear the Reaper" by Blue Oyster Cult. There was also quite a lot of Judas Priest and Twisted Sister, and completely bizarrely, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover by Paul Simon. So
not a bad playlist overall. Not a bad playlist.
It's all right.
Depending on your taste.
I think the reason for this was that they were actually basically just channeling in the local army radio station, and people started calling in for requests that were kind of Noriega themed, and I guess there was just some U.S. Army guy who had gone through a bit of a breakup, completely oblivious to what was going on around him, and just really needed to hear Paul Simon's dulcet tones. I saw a really good quote about this to describe this. "Noriega loved opera. He got sticks." Anyway.
Yeah, okay. So this was not his kind of music.
No, but there was a dual reason for this. Partly it was kind of a show of force and to, stop him from sleeping and all this kind of thing. But it was also to cover up the noise of negotiations and to prevent eavesdropping on any communications that were going on between the Vatican and the U.S. Army. Eventually, Monsignor Laboa threatened to evacuate all of his staff and declare a new embassy somewhere else, leaving Noriega with no option really but to surrender. Before he did, he wrote a letter to his wife telling her that he was, I go now on a new adventure.
That's not going to be fun.
His new adventure has been to be behind prison bars for pretty much the rest of his life. He was given 30 years by a U.S. court and was imprisoned in the U.S. Then eventually he was extradited to France because he had funneled funds over to France, and as they were the result of drug trafficking, he was imprisoned there as well. And very recently,